Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The Man Who Dealt in Death by Marlena Frank. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Too late. Hattie. Hattie could tell Papa had been drinking. She could smell it on him when he stepped through the door of their shanty, his beard thick with alcohol and sweat, stumbling over his own 2 feet. The squat wooden building shuddered as he shoved the door open. Dwindling orange sunlight trickled in, bringing with it dust and sand from the road. On instinct, Hattie shoved the bag of crackers she was munching on into the pocket of her skirt. Papa didn't need to see that, especially when he was drunk as a skunk. He would accuse her of stealing it, which she had, but that was beside the point. What did he expect her to do when the house didn't have a scrap of food? Sometimes he forgot he had a daughter at all. Sitting up straighter, she swallowed down the remains of a cracker. "You're home early." "Yeah, well, you ain't my boss," he grumbled. Hattie had to bite back a retort. She sometimes fancied telling Papa's boss that he liked to duck out of the mines and stay at the bar too late, but if she did that, there would be no shanty to return to. Papa tried to pull off one of his shoes, but ended up falling instead. He slammed onto the dusty floorboards, which creaked under his weight. He blinked for a moment as if slow to realize he was on the floor, then threw his head back and laughed. His breath smelled rancid. Hattie frowned. "You didn't get paid, did you?" Papa stopped laughing and stared at her in confusion. "Papa, please don't tell me you drank all our money again." He scrunched up his face as he thought for a moment, then looked around the room. "We all out of food again? I thought we just got some. Did you eat it all already?" Hattie sighed and sat back in the rickety wooden chair. "That was 2 weeks ago, Papa." He looked at her again. A look of true embarrassment blanched his ruddy cheeks. "Hang on, I think I have some left." He pushed his fingers into his pocket and pulled out a sweaty dollar bill. A few bits fell and clattered on the floor. Hattie got to her feet and braved the smell, crouching to pick up the few coins. Papa stared at her as she picked up each bit off the floor. "You put up with so much from your old Papa." There was a warmth in his voice that she didn't get to hear very often these days. It reminded her of how it used to be back before Mama died, back before he took to the drink like water. Hattie tried to smile. "I love you, Papa, even if you drink too much." She had reached forward to pick up the last bit when Papa reached over and pulled the bag of crackers out of her pocket. "What's this?" She closed her eyes for a moment. It was a gift," she lied. Papa put up his head up, and she could see the exhaustion on his face. "Hattie, you can't go stealing things. One of these days someone is going to catch you, and I won't be able to do anything about it." "What was I supposed to do?" She grabbed the bag back and stuffed it in her pocket. "Do you know what they do to thieves in these parts?" She knew, and she didn't care. No sheriff would hang a child, especially a hungry girl just looking for a box of crackers to get by. She picked up the last bit and headed for the door. Her father watched her with red-rimmed eyes. "If your mother was alive, you'd have a better life here," he said. "And you'd still be drunk all the time," Hattie spat before she hurried out of the house and down the steps, dodging any further words from him. Hattie hadn't meant to be out so late. She'd got caught up picking out groceries. It wasn't every day she got to wander the store and ogle all the food after living off crackers for days. Then the old grocer accused her of window shopping instead of buying. The look on his face when she pulled out Papa's dollar was priceless. She had a whole crate of food, almost half her size. She wasn't used to carrying so much. When her arms got tired, she stopped by the Crimson Theater and peeked inside to watch the funny lady on stage. When everyone cheered and clapped, Hattie couldn't help but join in. She'd never seen a lady on stage before, and she wondered what it was like making so many people laugh and cheer. Maybe one day she would get to be on stage too. Then her Papa would never drink all their grocery money again. Red velvet curtains closed. She'd been watching the show for a while, so she huffed a sigh and reached down again for the crate, resting it against her hip as she carried it back to the shanty. She watched her step to keep from stepping in any horse manure. As she left downtown Peridot, the dark night swept over her, chilled and windy. Stars flooded the night sky, but they were distant lights, not enough to illuminate the shadows in this part of town. She walked down the dusty street, passing dozens of shanties like the one she lived in. The wooden homes were barely built strong enough to keep out the wind. A few people eyed her from the windows, but she wasn't afraid. Hattie had lived here all her life. She knew these people. Finally, she reached her home. She put down the groceries on the bottom step and arched her back, feeling her muscles ache. Papa, I'm back. She waited for him to come outside. Maybe he would be hungry after sleeping off his drink. But Papa didn't appear. She sighed and climbed the steps, pushing open the door in a huff. Papa? The door leaned at an odd angle, and the rickety wooden chair she had sat in earlier lay on its side. What concerned her most was that one chair leg was broken and hung on by a few splinters of wood. She crouched down beside it, trying to figure out what had happened. Then she saw the blood on the corner of the seat. Her heart pounded in her ears. Papa? She called again, her voice filled with panic. Only silence replied. She grabbed the dangling chair leg and yanked it off the seat, then she went back outside. She wanted to call to him again, but the darkness of the night seemed overwhelming now. Down the steps, she tripped over the crate of food in her panic. Most of the shanties out here were dark. The wind made a hollow sound and blew sand into her eyes. She wiped at them in annoyance before she spotted movement farther down the street. A tall man, maybe Papa's height, stumbled between the houses and away from the main road. It could be Papa, but it could have been whoever must have attacked him. She gripped the chair leg in her hand and ran after him. Hattie was an excellent runner. Years of having to outrun angry shop owners and kids meant she was one of the fastest sprinters in Peridot. Sand kicked up as she dodged a pile of debris and leaped over a set of angled stairs. She could still make out the man's shape loping ahead, but not much farther. Pushing black hair out of her face, she darted up toward him. That's when she realized he was dragging something behind him. No, not something. Someone. Papa! She cried, hoping he would wake up, fight back, help her. Instead, the loping man turned around and his face was pale and gaunt. Let go of my Papa! She cried, crouching down beside her father and pulling on him. Daddy? Something dark and wet was on the side of Papa's face, and he couldn't seem to open his eyes, but her heart soared at hearing his voice. Then she felt a painful tug on her arm and was lifted off the ground. She screamed as the man brought her up to his face, but she still held the chair leg in her other hand. She swung it with all her strength at his arm, his face, his head, but even when she slammed it into his mouth and split his lip, he didn't even wince. Then he flung her, and she slammed into the side of a shanty house. Splintering wood surrounded her as darkness consumed her. The loping man picked her up under one arm. Then he reached down and grabbed her Papa and dragged him. He took them far away from the shanties, away from the prying eyes or ears, and away from the safety of Peridot.